What's up, everybody? Welcome to the Future Proof Podcast. I am Andrew Tyree. Let's get it. Yes, sir. Yes, sir. It is. We're recording this on Friday, January 17th. You guys will probably be hearing this on Tuesday. And in between now and Tuesday, a couple of things are supposed to happen. One, the TikTok ban is supposed to take place. That's supposed to happen Sunday, January 19th. Now, up until right before I recorded this episode, it was widely feared and expected that you were going to wake up on Sunday and TikTok was no longer going to be on your phone. Like it was just going to be you click the app button and it goes to some website explaining the ban and things like that. However, just before I started recording, the Biden administration put out a statement that said they are not going to enforce the TikTok ban. Uh, it's Tuesday when you're watching this, so you know better than I do right now whether that is true. But that's what they said. They said they're going to leave it up to the Trump administration to enforce the ban, which the Trump administration can't really tie its shoes the right way. So I don't know if this is going to be enforced at all. And I've always had sort of a sneaky suspicion somewhere in the back of my mind while everybody else was freaking out, while the Supreme Court was doubling down on the fact that TikTok was not going to be able to stay. I never panicked. You can go to my TikTok and you can look at the videos that I put out. And I was never like, oh my God, when this app goes away, because I just knew you cannot, excuse me, you cannot have something where 170 million Americans are on an app and you just take it away. Like it just did not make sense no matter what people said. The world is far too connected. That's something you could have done maybe before social media. But the world is far too connected. Um, it just didn't make sense. Now, if it does happen, and if I'm talking right now and TikTok is no longer an app on your phone, then clearly I'm wrong. But I just never felt it just never seemed real. It seemed like there was going to be some whether a company was going to buy it or whether you know whatever was going to happen. I just felt like in some way, some shape, some form, some fashion, TikTok was still going to be here. Um, not lots of people, but people have been even coming forward offering to buy TikTok because that was one of the conditions of it being shut down. It had to be shut down, or an America-based company had to buy it, or ByteDance, the Chinese-based company, had to move their operations over here to America. Those were the conditions. So Mr. Beast put out a video saying that he was having serious conversations with billionaires, and I believed him, and that he had a contract ready for TikTok, for ByteDance.
I just got out of a meeting with a bunch of billionaires. TikTok, we mean business. This is my lawyer right here. We have an offer ready for you. We want to buy the platform. America deserves TikTok. Give me a seat at the table. Let me save this platform, TikTok.
There's another gentleman with a bald head who is white. I forget his name, but we'll throw his clip in if we can find it. Who's also talking about making an offer for just the US portion of TikTok without the algorithm, which is like a peanut butter and jelly sandwich with no peanut butter and no jelly. He just wanted the bread of TikTok. And he was making an offer saying he thought it was worth 20 billion for just that piece. All these things going on, man, I just didn't see, especially with TikTok playing such a big part, as they say, in Trump getting reelected. I just didn't see it going away. So I still don't see it going away. You're watching this on Tuesday. I could be right. I could be wrong. But if it's not gone by the time you're watching this, it's never going anywhere. So congratulations to all those apps that made a bunch of money in the fear of TikTok going away. I've joined some of them. I joined Fanbase. Shout out to Black Ownership. owned by Isaac Hayes III. I joined Fanbase. I even tried to join Red Note, but I can't understand the instructions when I download the app, so I don't know how to take it past phase one. I joined Blue Sky, who made a ton of money from people being scared of TikTok going away. There are a bunch of apps who made a bunch of money because the fear was there. And congratulations to you guys. I won't be on those platforms probably. The only platform I'll probably stay on is that's new is Fanbase because I'm just trying to support the brother. But I'll still be on TikTok. I'll still be on Instagram. I'll still be unfortunately, I went back to Facebook, but I'm only on Facebook. I haven't been on Facebook in years. Years. Okay. I went back to Facebook just because I started Future Proof and I wanted to give that audience a chance to join the community and be a part of everything. So that's the only reason I went back there. So you can find Future Proof over there. Threads, all the things. I'm there, but the new ones, I'm not trying to figure out. I'm not trying to learn Mandarin. No shade to the Chinese, but I'm not interested. And does that sound close-minded of me? I don't know. It's over for me in learning new languages. The period of time where I had the desire and I could just pick up and learn a new language, those days are gone. So I'm not learning Mandarin to be on social media. Um, but shout out to everybody who's doing good. What else is supposed to happen on Tuesday? The inauguration. The inauguration is supposed to happen today, Tuesday, not Friday when I'm recording this, but today on Tuesday when you're listening to it. Trump is supposed to be sworn into the White House again for the second time, and they moved the inauguration indoors because of weather. Never seen that done before, but nothing in this whole administration will ever surprise me. I didn't know he hadn't already been sworn in. As a person who was really keyed into the election and the whole election process this go round, the last couple go rounds, but this go round especially, as soon as I found out he won, within 2 or 3 days, my attention was out of there. Once he started picking idiots to run his cabinet, his cabinet choices. Once he started picking all these idiots, I literally my self-preservation mode kicked in and I stopped listening. So I didn't even know he hadn't been inaugurated. But looking over the news, I realized it's supposed to be Tuesday. So we'll see how that goes. Um, and those are the major things happening. The fires in LA are still a big problem. There have been mudslides. There have been, people are obviously still displaced. Luckily, there have been a ton of organizations, big and small, that have popped up who are accepting donations, who are giving out donations, who are helping people try and rebuild, especially um, the people who are eh, diverse and the minority communities in Altadena and Eaton, the Eaton fires. Um, those people need a lot of help in the future proof community. I have 2 posts where I have listed some links and some services that you guys can go and take advantage of. If you're watching this on YouTube, I'll link some more in the caption below. If you need anything, please drop a comment, reach out. You can email me, andrew@futureproof.com. You can leave a comment on this video. Go into the community, leave a comment on those posts. Plenty of ways. Reach out to somebody who can get some help to you. Please do not be afraid to ask. Another thing we're doing is all of the money that Future Proof makes this month from the podcast, from the courses, from everything. We are donating 5% to helping those affected by the fires in California. That was my home for a very long time, and I am very partial to that place. So much love and much support and much actual support, not just words, but actual service um, to you guys. Bill Burr was on Jimmy Kimmel the other night, and he had a lot to say about the way the fires affected him and how he thinks people are handling the fires. I thought he had a very funny take. Here is Bill Burr.
I feel lucky.
Are you guys back in?
And I think everybody did a great job. Yeah.
Unlike the internet, you know?
Yeah, right. I know. It's right.
Oh, my God. All of these fire experts. Why didn't you just fly a helicopter into the ocean? And then just, I don't know, because there was 100-knot winds? You want to do that? You want to do that at night, you lunatic?
How are you?
This was definitely mismanaged.
That's a big word we're hearing now.
Mismanaged, like some idiot on the internet knows how to manage the worst fire in LA, sitting there in his underwear. You know what? Looking at the footage on the internet, I have determined that this here was mismanaged.
You know about helicopters because I remember, and it's interesting now thinking about it because you said that.
About it. I know about the one that I fly. Other than that, I don't know anything about it.
You know
but
something.
If you're on the internet, you know everything.
I hope you know about it because you said that you got your pilot's license in case like all hell broke loose in L.A., you could get out of L.A. And at any moment, did you think, I'm going to make a run for that helicopter?
Well, the error in my thought was I didn't realize how expensive helicopters were. So all I have is a two-seater, and I didn't want to have to make Sophie's choice with my family. So...
Funny stuff from Bill Burr. He's right. Everybody becomes an expert on the internet when a tragedy happens. People who don't know anything. One of the greatest things and the worst things about social media and the internet. Period. We have a great guest for you guys today. He is a brother of mine. He is the godfather to my children. He is the smartest person I know. I'm making sure I'm saying this. I don't want to lie to you, but literally, I don't have a conversation with him where I do not learn something, where I don't walk away enlightened, where I don't walk away inspired, and I don't walk away with new, fresh ideas on how to do everything. And I believe that you guys will get the same thing. We get the same thing out of this conversation from our guest today. Before that, let's pay some bills real quick. This episode is brought to you by Future Proof, a community of forward thinkers shaping tomorrow. If you want early access to conversations like this one with Bryan that you're about to hear right now, or are you looking for a network of creators and innovators to see who and what's coming next? Well, join us inside Future Proof, where members get exclusive podcast content, stuff that you're not going to hear here, monthly masterminds from me and other industry leaders looking to shape and direct the future, and direct access to those industry leaders. Your first month is free because I want you to experience the value firsthand. Head to wefutureproof.com to join us. And now, my conversation with Bryan Lattimore. All right. 4, 5. All right. You guys have heard me ramble on long enough. It's time for me to bring in our guest this week. I hope you're ready. Now, if you've ever wondered who helps billionaires build their creative teams, you're going to find out today. I want you to meet Bryan Lattimore. Okay. He's the force behind special projects for Priscilla and Laurene Powell Jobs. He's also worked with Mark Echo. He's also directed over $10 million towards Black and Brown creatives. I'm so excited to have my brother on the podcast today. Please help me welcome Bryan Lattimore. What's up, B?
What's going on, brother? Good to see your face.
Yeah, man. I'm glad you're here. You're a busy man. You always make time for me, and I appreciate that. But I know you got a lot going on, so thanks for sitting down, man.
100%. It's an honor to be here talking about future proofing. It's man, it's just beautiful to see you shine, see you help people, and so I'm looking forward to this.
Thank you, man. I appreciate it. So you've done a lot of things, but I want to start in the beginning. I want to talk about young Bryan. I want to talk about the kid, the child, Bryan Lattimore. When you were coming up, you didn't grow up completely here in America, right? You grew up a lot of different places.
A couple different places.
Okay.
Spent some time in Okinawa, Japan.
Okay.
Spent time in Kansas City, Missouri. Spent some time in Milwaukee. So we bounced around. I was born in South Carolina.
Yeah.
So a few touch points.
Yeah, I love that. So what was your mindset back then? Like when you were thinking about, we always talk about what we want to do when we grow up. I imagine, and you can tell me whether I'm completely wrong, but I imagine it wasn't, sit in rooms with billionaires and help them, plan strategy and do things like that. So where was your mindset at when you were a child?
To be honest with you, I've never told you this. Can I be honest with
Yeah,
you?
no, hit me.
So actually, it was probably at the age of 6 or 7. So growing up in Japan, we only had one English channel. That
Okay.
English channel was NBC. And getting ready for the morning for school, I'd watch the Today Show. So the Today Show, Brian Gumbel, Katie Couric.
I love that.
I want to be on the couch. I want to be sitting down with a host of television, either as the host or someone with them
Yeah.
in the morning. And
Yeah.
so literally, I saw myself doing this right now. And fast forward, so I ended up going to journalism school. I ended up right before I started school, I met Bryant Gumbel's nephew,
Right.
Elton
Right.
Gumbel, and then fast forward, I ended up meeting Bryant Gumbel, and may his brother Greg rest in peace. But just big inspiration to me were the journalists, were the creators, were the creators, and that's what I saw myself doing.
Yeah, shout out to Brian Gumbel, man. I don't even know if he knows how many people he touched and inspired and influenced just by being some representation, in those spaces back then in the 80s and the 90s.
Yeah.
That's crazy. So how do you get from being a kid who wants to, be a journalist or be in those spaces to deciding, no, I'm going business, entrepreneurship, building these impressive teams? What's the pivot point for you? Because we've known each other for over 20 years. And when I met you,
We
okay,
met
here's
when
the
we
story.
were 5.
Yeah, we met when we were 5.
Yes.
When I met you, I was thinking about this morning. I was like, I don't know if I knew what you wanted to do. like I know that, I was heavy in the arts. I was trying to act, and I know you were doing a bit of that, but I don't know if I knew what your dream was when we were, 5.
Mhm.
So what did you want to do back then? And then when did that change? When did that pivot?
So I think number one, I'm a dreamer. So I have big creative ambition. And that evolves as I discover new things in the world and learn new things. I think the thing about growing up overseas is that number one, I was an outsider. So I was the only Black kid in a Japanese Montessori preschool. Number two, I'm in the military family. So at any given sort of in 3-year clips, I could be in a different place, living in a different house. And 3, you sort of have to navigate socially. How do you make friends? How do you keep friends? I was a horrible pen pal, but you're thinking about your social setup as a kid as you get older. And so all of those things, I think, required me to be a problem solver, a creative problem solver. So I was never I was always interested in technology. I was always interested in gadgets. Like, it was a mix of being interested in culture and the world and then being interested in technology in the future. And so my 2 subscriptions as a kid were popular science magazines. I was constantly looking at like, what could the future of robots and computers look like? But then I was also curious about National Geographic. So I was interested in if I were to land in Ghana or if I were to land in Namibia, like what would that be like? What food would I eat? And so it's those sort of, 2 things, those inspirations of being obsessed with culture, being obsessed with the future, that I think made me into a creative problem solver, that effectively my sort of goalposts would change as I learned new things. And so at the time when I saw Brian Gumbel and Katie Couric, I was like, oh. And then I saw Oprah. I was like, oh, I'm a be on television. That's the thing. And then, fast forward, I do journalism. I see myself on camera. I'm like, I'm a beautiful guy, but like I'm sweating.
Very beautiful.
It's hot here. And then there's probably some guy named Andrew Tyree who would be much better at this than me. What am I doing? And then and then it's like, then it becomes agencies. And then from agencies, it becomes like business school. So it's been a series of sprints and evolutions and learnings that I think has led me to. I never had this big goal of like, yeah, I'm about to sit down with the Billy Goats and do business deals. Like I was never that guy. I was more of like, wasn't even the ambition of money. It was more about the ambition of two things. One is, could I solve really interesting problems and have impact, whatever that meant? But then number two, how could I just have a great life? Like, how do you just sort of like go cool places and eat great food? I mean, it's like life is very simple at the very basics. And so I don't think I had any big ambitions, but all that said, we all know that billionaires eat really well and they travel really well. So.
All right. So talk to me a bit about like the moment, because there's a moment. Okay, so you graduate from undergrad, you're working at a very cool place, and suddenly you decide, I'm gonna go back to grad school. So what is that moment when you decide to go back to grad school, and what's the plan? Like, you're gonna go to grad school and you're gonna do what?
So 2006, 2007, I see a Black man named John Rice. He's also a fraternity brother. He's on the cover of a magazine. And the headline was something to the effect of like helping underrepresented groups getting into top business schools. I'm at home for break. I'm like, oh, that seems interesting, because sidebar, living in New York City, you get introduced to people who live in apartments where you take the elevator immediately into the living room.
Into their living room.
What are they doing? What types of drugs are they selling? What types of setups enable this type of lifestyle? That again, I'm coming from, family of teachers, military, like they're just not providing those types of apartments for captains in the Marine Corps. So anyway, long story short, I see John Rice on the cover of a magazine. I joined this program called MLT, which stands for Management Leadership for Tomorrow. They help me sort of write personal statements where I'm coming in with very poor versions of poetry and convert them into essays that allow me to get accepted into business school. So that's one piece of seeing John Rice. I think the second is actually in 2007, seeing the sky fall, or at least the indications that the sky was going to fall with the market. And what's crazy about the sky falling is that I've seen the sky fall now, as again, we've known each other 20 years. How many times have we seen the sky fall?
Yeah, lots.
How many times so literally the time I moved from California, there were fires that were happening in San Francisco.
Right.
1-year-old, he's coughing, asthma, like these things. And it's like, oh my gosh, the sky is falling. I need to make a move. So similarly, now, not because people are choosing, but because of various elements, the sky falling in Los Angeles. And so heart and prayers are going out to people in LA. And so essentially it was just every few years, it seems like, and now maybe it's even happening faster, but the sky falls and then you have to figure out, what the heck do you do? And for me, it was, how do I invest in myself? How do I get new skills? How do I make more money? Like, how do I become anti-fragile? How do I have multiple revenues? Eventually get there. Like, it's not going to happen overnight, but like, how do I get there? And so those were sort of the two things. It was John Rice, which was an on-ramp into a different life, into business school, potentially. I mean, that was a dream of business school. I mean, I can tell you the reality of it, which was great, but just different. And then the other was seeing the sky fall and you're like, all right, where do I go?
Do you think that, and no right or wrong answer, of course, but like, do you think that the sky is falling? It's so interesting, more often now because the world is a much crazier place, or are we adults with more things to worry about because when you're 18, like you're invincible. There's no wife, there's no kids. You have forever to live. You're gonna live to be 200, and you're just like, somebody got elected. Like I don't, what? Like I don't know. And then you're 40, and you're like, I got kids, I got a wife, I got to make sure everybody's good. And now everything that happens is a huge thing where you're questioning all your decisions that you've made or that you're making. Uh, what do you think it is?
We're playing 5-dimensional chess, which essentially means that the sky falling for you and what that means is different for you than what it means for me and a few other people. So I think that's one. I think number two is that, yes, our awareness and hopefully our learning has elevated and wisdom has elevated as we've gotten older. So we are aware of what poses as a risk to you, your kid, your family, your loved ones. And then I think number three, if we were to zoom out into the course of human history, my bet is that the intersection between technology and being able to get information about what is happening in the world, along with this moment in history where the earth has sort of gotten, so I'm just thinking about the fires, or I'm thinking about technology and mental health. I'm thinking about America and how it sort of has gone to this massive peak economically, and then certain pieces of capitalism are breaking, and people are saying like, oh, it actually doesn't work for everybody all the time. It needs to be redone and remade and reimagined. And so I think it's the perfect storm of things that mix awareness with the reality of the moment in time that we live in, that creates a perfect storm around in your individuality and your perception of life as to like what means that the sky is falling. But there's certain things you can't argue with. When the market goes down, the market goes down. And so,
Right.
So yeah.
No, you're right. There is an intersection of like, we can see so much more than we were able to see when we were kids, right? We didn't know about the unrest in the Middle East moment to moment to moment, right? When we were kids. And also like more stuff is happening. Like crazier things are happening. So I love that. So you go to grad school, you come out of grad school with a plan. Now, was your plan to work at a company and rise the corporate ladder, or was your plan like, I'm going to strike out and be an entrepreneur and build a unicorn?
I studied entrepreneurship, so my goal was to start a company and do that.
Mm-hmm.
In the middle of the market, sort of the downturn 2008, 2009, what was happening was it was really difficult to get a job, like nearly impossible, hyper competitive. And I was at Wharton, where a lot of really smart people go. People aren't familiar. It's just like Stanford GSB Business School. It's just like Harvard. It's just like Kellogg. I mean, all these sort of top schools where a lot of people who have been trained from an early age, earlier than me, know how to sort of do business models, finance. They've worked in venture capital already. They already worked at McKinsey, at Google. And so here I am, one of, 800 in a class. And we got to figure out what comes next. And it's not clear if you're starting a company, you'll be able to, raise capital. Do you have the right relationships to do all those things? So anyway, long story short, I quickly moved from, I'm about to be, and I don't even know, I guess Steve Jobs was big then. I had an iPhone. So it was like, I'm going to be the black so-and-so.
Yeah.
To let me get this cheddar, because there's debt, there's sort of all these different things. So anyway, long story short, I ended up applying for consulting jobs, because those were the things where you could do it for a few years and you have options. Mm-hmm. And so I was like, you know what? I don't have a great business idea. I see a couple guys doing really well with Warby Parker. I saw Harry's. I saw sort of the early days of what are now really big public companies. And I was like, like that. it takes a lot of advantage in order to like, do this. It was like 4 white dudes who have their own connections, relationships, and they're brilliant, and they're at Wharton. I'm like, all right, not that I can't do it. Like, I'm in class with them. So like we can, we're all operating the same level here, but it oftentimes doesn't come down to how smart you are. Like, life doesn't give a fuck if you're smart or not. And that was the whole, and by the way, this is sort of the thing. You end up sort of signing up for, you go to New York, which is smart because of connections and relationships. That matters. You go to business school, again, maybe it changes your mindset of what's possible. That matters. You go to McKinsey, you make some money. That matters. But it's actually not about how smart you are, because I've seen literally people who are not smart, like, do well. And frankly, it's not even about pejoratively, are you smart or not? It doesn't matter. It's literally like, do you have the right relationships? Do you have a little bit of money? Can you take some risks? Do you have some time? And are you following a blueprint or some steps that are sort of make sense? Are you a good listener? All these various things. So anyway, I didn't know I knew I wanted to do entrepreneurship. I quickly pivoted into working in corporate. But little did I know along the way, as I sort of go back to Bryan, the 5-year-old, Bryan, the 8-year-old, as a creative problem solver, like, oh, you land in a place, you don't know anybody, people looking at you, you're different. How do you bend the arc of the universe and build relationships in ways that people like you, that people want to work with you, and you're effectively creative problem solving, leveraging culture and leveraging what gifts you've been given. And so similarly, as I land in New York, I meet people like you, I'm around artists, but I'm also seeing private equity investors, I'm at Wharton. All these different things have sort of were entry points and ingredients for me to continue to be a creative problem solver, which I think are sort of some core components for me of being an entrepreneur.
That's so interesting, man. Like, you saying that it has nothing to do with like how smart you are is literally the same thing that I've been shouting about creativity. Like, has nothing to do with how talented you are or how well you do a thing, because I've seen some of the best singers I've ever heard in the world in a subway. Like, would blow your mind, and they'll never get a deal. You know what I mean? I've seen some of the best actors in acting class, and they just, they're not around they're not making the right move. So there's a component of being talented, just like there's a component of being smart, but then there's a whole different component of like these intangibles, like you said, relationships, and like making the right chess moves at the right time. And people don't know that. People think they need to get better at the thing, and that is important, but it's so much more important to figure out what other things you need to be getting better at. Like you said, building relationships, finding yourself in the right place, being lucky. There's so many other things that you need to perfect besides the thing, and I don't think people know that.
By the way, Champion asked me, Dad, what is luck? 2 days ago. And I gave him
Champion is your son.
My son.
Yeah, I'm just for the people listening. I know this, but just for the people listening.
Yes. But I hang out with champions for all the people listening. That's all you need to know. Also my son. But he asked me, what is luck? And I effectively just said, it's a numbers game. It's odds. And so, and I went on to describe, what does it mean and what does it look like for us to make our own luck? What does it look like to manufacture luck? What does it look like to increase the odds? And you're a poker player.
Very much so.
But you're effectively playing scenarios. Yeah, effectively, luck is mapping out and strategizing scenarios, but not to the point where you get into analysis paralysis. You actually get to a point where you move quickly, which, to be honest with you, makes me think of you, right? Because oftentimes I'm probably the 1 month strategist. You're like the 1 week or 1 day strategist where you're like, oh, is that the plan? Is that the blueprint? Like, let me just go, right? Because I think it's this, it's the last thing I'll say that I didn't mention on what does it take to be successful. There's this element of intuition that is the opposite of what corporate teaches you. Corporate will say, it's not enough to trust your own internal judgment. And in some ways that's right? Because like you can't go in and tell Coca-Cola, here's probably the right idea for you. Coca-Cola is like, we got billions at risk here. We need analysis. We need something, da-da-da-da. Versus in the creative world, and I mean, you can speak to this, and I love your perspective on it. There's this element of intuition and gut that you have to learn to hear and trust, that along with your set of things and practices that you've invested in yourself for, that allow you to be successful. And you sort of got to get out the starting block. And oftentimes that gut feeling, that intuition, that action bias is what's critical.
Yeah. You're right. In poker, it's the same way. It's a lot about making the best decision you can in the moment. And a big thing that like all pro poker players will tell you is you cannot be results oriented. And it's so hard not to be results oriented, because it's like you try a thing and it fails. You're like, man, that didn't work. But it could have not worked for a million reasons. Like the river card, if we're speaking in poker terms, could have just screwed you. Or the guy playing across from you could have done something that he never should have done, but he just decided to do that. Doesn't mean you didn't play it right. So poker players, they think of their earnings and their winnings over a lifetime, as opposed to thinking about their winnings over sessions. So you ask a poker player, how'd you do today? If he's a real poker player, he'll be like, it doesn't matter. Like I lost today, but it doesn't matter, because over my lifetime, I'm up. I'm up X amount of dollars over my lifetime. And I think that's how people should think. If we're talking about business, if we're talking about being creative, I think people should be more concerned about where they are at over the course of their lives versus did the last thing you do work.
By the way, this is something I heard it first from Hank Willis Thomas, the artist that I used to work with when I was working at Emerson Collective. And he started an organization with a bunch of others called the Wide Awakes. And one of the core philosophies and principles of the Wide Awakes was playing the infinite game. And so there's sort of these difference between a game that is very short-term driven. It's almost like with a relationship. If I'm only going to see you one time in my life, how do I treat you? Versus if I'm going to have to see you every day, how do I treat you? And the idea is, how do you bring the mindset of the infinite game to everything you do? And so how do you treat the person who you're only going to see one time, but still treat them like you're going to see them every day? You're not going to screw them over. You're going to be kind to them. You're going to be generous. And so similarly, I love that concept, that principle of not being results oriented as a poker player. And how do we bring that to business? How do we bring that to sort of the business of creativity and having this long-term view? And then frankly, bringing it back to self and not being hard on ourselves, because we're going to have tough years. Like I can tell you 2024 was a tough year. I was going to say horrible. It was just tough.
Yeah.
But if you're right, if I zoom out a little bit, this is one of those where I have perspective, I can have more gratitude, and I can have a little bit more of a focus on what happens next. What am I learning now, and where am I going next? Because my perspective is different. I love that.
Yeah. So this is a thing that I also tell. I also tell my wife, and she'll probably get upset at me for saying this out loud. But she has she doesn't think about life like that. If something goes wrong, or if we're going through a hard time, it really affects her in the moment. And I think because my life has probably been harder than
Mm,
hers, the
mm,
way I grew up, I naturally go to that like over the course of your lifetime sort of mentality. So I'm always like, but look where we live. Look at what we're eating. Look at how healthy our kids are. Look how happy we are. Look at the house. Like we pull up to the house and I'm like, it's not a mansion, but I'm like, I didn't grow up in this. You know what I mean? We got which car are you taking? We got two. I had none for a very long time, or I had one that was also the house. So like my upbringing was so much worse. And I'm like, over the course of our lives, if this is where we ended up, this is very good. We're shooting for something much bigger, but
mm,
this is great. And I think to your other point is this is all about for me putting up shots. Like you mentioned like how I'm quick to execute, and sometimes it doesn't work. But what I hear from a lot of successful business people that really always sticks with me is that they're like, making a slow decision is almost worse than making a bad decision.
mm.
And it's just like, if I went out and tried to do a thing and it didn't work, which I've done a couple times in 2024 even, it's okay. Okay, like didn't work. Like chuck it. You know what I mean? This might be the third thing you've heard me launch this year, but that's because the other two didn't work, and I learned something from it, and I'm adjusting. And now this is another thing. This is my third show I put out this year. Like I put out a show called Concepts of a Show. I put out a show called The Morning After Project, and Future Proof is my third idea in 2024 going into 2025. And it's because I learned so much from those first two by like just doing them and being like, okay, this doesn't work. Like, but here's how we can adjust it. And now if this goes crazy, people will be like, oh wow, like Future Proof is such an amazing idea, blah, blah, blah. But I have to put up like 14 shots, you know what I mean, to get here.
And
So
that is the lesson,
yeah,
to keep going.
yeah,
That's all. Like literally almost every lesson for me, at least in business, has led to this sort of that point that you're just making, which is to keep going. That's what I would tell myself a year ago, 2 years ago. That's what I'm going to keep telling myself. And, I think sometimes people talk about toxic positivity. I think if we sort of, and again, we can get into definitions, but I think it's really about if we're staying in this place of gratitude, staying in this place of like trust, self, universe, however you frame it, you can't make any other decision but to keep going.
yeah. And you only fail when you stop. Like it sounds so cliche, and I've heard it coming up where I was like, yeah. But if you ask anybody who's made it, and I've listened to, Morgan Freeman on this. I listened to, Tom Hanks on this. I listened to other people who are in the creative industry talk about the only reason they made it is an unwillingness to quit. Like Tom Hanks will tell you, and if I can find the quote, I'll stick it in, but he'll tell you that in his acting group coming out of school, he was one of the least talented, he says, his own words. He's like, and the only reason he made it is because he just refused to go home. He just didn't go back to Indiana or wherever it is he's from, where everybody else was kind of like, it's been a hard year, I'm going to go back.
Who's that black actor who was like 4 kids or something, and he was on the verge of committing suicide for the life insurance?
Juan Carlo, I forget his last name, but the guy from Breaking Bad. Guy from everything. But yeah, Juan Carlo Esposito, I think is his last name. He had just had a divorce. He had 4 kids. He was about to unalive himself, and then he got Breaking Bad. You just don't know. And these things happen, I mean, in your 40s, in your 50s, in your 60s, and you just don't know. And suddenly you have 30 years, 40 years of just like living out your dreams, and you think you're late, and you're not late. You know what I mean? So all these things are just, I don't know, they're life lessons, but
Come on, thank you for creating space in the show. I don't even know that was in your agenda.
it was not.
You literally created space for encouraging someone to keep going, and I think if this episode does nothing else but to encourage someone, I think this will, effectively have been and manifested its purpose.
There you go. I love that. Okay, well, so you go, you get out of school. How do you end up in a billionaire's office? How do you end up going to work and being like, I go to work for a billionaire or a company, run by, like, how do you do that? Because I know there are people out there who would love to have that opportunity or who think they have something to give. That can't be like you didn't find it on LinkedIn. like how do you land there?
So in a very practical way, someone who I worked with in 2004, 2005, got a job there.
Where's there? Which billionaire are we talking about here?
Yeah. So in 2005, I was working in an ad agency. Someone who I was working with at the time got a job to build the brand, to effectively be, VP of marketing, CMO for Chan Zuckerberg Initiative. And that's a LLC, philanthropic LLC, founded by Priscilla Chan and Mark Zuckerberg. And so I had an idea, I had a product idea that was effectively artificial intelligence and natural language processing in 2017. I pitched that person that product and said we could potentially use it for CZI. And they said, yeah, let's try it. And so that started a consulting contract. I showed up and it was a room full of people who used to work in the Obama administration, people who worked in philanthropy, nonprofit, and people who worked in business. One of those people was David Plouffe, one of the strategists who helped Obama sort of in his campaign, help him get elected. And I don't know, after a few weeks, he calls me into a conference room and says, you're great. We'd love to keep working with you. Would you join the team? And that was the start of me working at CZI.
Here's a bag. He said, here's a bag of money.
I was an entrepreneur was doing freelancing. And so the bag meets 401k meets benefits. I was like, oh, and that's actually why we have a child. That's actually why Champion exists, because the security of, this is going to be around for at least a year. Maybe I can procreate today.
Maybe I can have sex with purpose. Well, you're better than me because I was having sex with a purpose with no security.
Come on.
My security came after. So.
Intuition. It's the intuition.
Putting up shots, baby. Putting up shots. Oh man, where do you get the confidence, bro? Like, I'm thinking about myself. I feel like I'm a very confident person. Where do you get the confidence to? I can probably match you on confidence all the way up to I'm going to pitch you this idea. Maybe you can take it to your billionaire boss and you guys can use this. When they say, oh, well, cool, you come too. That's when my butthole would have puckered up and I'd have been like, wait, you want me to do what? Where does that confidence come from? Did you know? Were you just like, yeah, I was born for this? Or were you like, oh, shit?
I mean, I think, again, coming back to creative problem solving, usually when I say yes to something, I see it happening in 3 different ways. And this is in some ways a gift, and some of this is actually not great. But I'm always seeing multiple ways how something can get done. Now, the question is, well, what's the best way? What's the right way? What's the way that optimizes for peace and optimizes for wealth and all these different things? I don't know. Some people seem to have a cheat code on that. I don't. But for me, I say yes to things even before it is certain, because I'm committed to figuring it out. And I feel a high degree of ownership and a high degree of responsibility to everything I say yes to. Now, as I get older and I get more wise, I'm saying yes to fewer things. But I think, unfortunately, it's some of it's for the thrill and for the fun of it, and some of it has been for survival, that I've said yes to things because I'm like, there's no other way. And I would imagine as a creative, you said like, oh, have you had a role or something like that where you're like, yo, I'm gonna say yes to this, and I don't know if I'm gonna like nail it, but like I'm gonna say,
Brother, they asked me to host my own TV show for the first time. They're like, "Do you think you could hold down 6 episodes of your own show? No co-host, no guest, just you." I was like, "Hell yeah." I had never done it before. To your point, I remember the first day I was on set for Beyond the Block. We were in the mountains in LA. We were shooting the opening sequence. I had 2 pages of open. Welcome to Los Angeles, where blah 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 blah. The truth that I had gotten that's memorized, and I thought it was going to be me and maybe the cameraman and like the director who I'd met on FaceTime, and it was 10 people from Tastemade. It was 10 people from Realtor.com who was putting up the money. It was they were in suits. They were in the mountains. They were in suits and business skirts and the wrong shoes. And I got there. They mic'd me up and they were like, "The show costs $1.2 million a season to shoot. Go."
but to that point, actually, as I think about it, I'm a theater kid. That's what I did. I've been doing talent shows since I was 7, 8, winning talent shows, a few of them anyway.
Yeah.
I think the arts, I think theater, I think acting, again, I didn't see myself being able to do it professionally. But when you ask, where does the confidence come from? For me, I started seeing the connection point in the constellation between arts, creativity, and business, where you might see them as different. You might see them as being able to get in front of 100 people, 1,000 people, improv or say some lines as like one thing. I see that of building a product for 100 people or 1,000 people, asking them to pay $5 for something that I don't know if is gonna solve their problem just yet, but I'm committed to it. Like, to me, that they're similar. And I think creativity, I think the creative community, and you saw my wife pull up and was like, I don't know if you can get these AirPods for this interview, and just
Maybe not, player.
Exactly. Relationship with someone who is tougher than me, an artist, by the way, who is like, hell no, bro. Figure out your own shit. It's like that type of thing that actually gives me the confidence to figure it out.
Yeah. Yeah. No, 100%, man. I do think of it as different. And now that you mention it, there are points in my life, opening for Jill Scott, performing at Bankers Life Stadium in front of 18,000 people. Like, there are moments where like you're literally shitting your pants because you have no idea if this is going to work. But I think the acting, there's some sort of a connection between like acting like it's going to work and somewhere between you acting like it and actually standing up to do it, it just starts working. Which goes back to putting up shots and doing it quickly, because we don't know if this idea or that idea is going to work, but we just going to start. We're just going to start walking down the street, and I don't know. And, my mother and I, we don't have the best relationship, but I'm actually going to go ahead and give that to her. I'm going to attribute that quality in me to her, because I've seen her do some amazing things as a single mother. And I've seen her pick up and move to a location where she had never been with no money and no plan, and just like, we got to go right now. Sky is falling. We got to go. And I've seen her figure it out. And I've seen her do it more than once. Like, I'm going to show up and we're going to figure it out. And I think seeing that has led me to be like, oh yeah, we could figure it out. We'll always be able to just figure it out, which my wife thinks is crazy. Wife thinks I'm a lunatic, but but I'm always like, we could just.
But one thing on that though, I think there is a piece to, particularly in business, that I'm evolving and maturing into, is keeping the confidence and the determination to figure it out, and pairing that with things that do work out. So an example of that is, and what I love about what you're doing, there are people with smaller audiences, with less talent, with all the things, just remove, who have podcasts, who have courses, who are newsletters, whatever, that, again, maybe not $1 billion, maybe not 100 million, but these people are making $1 million a year. They're making $500,000 a year. There are models to look to that say and suggest that you don't have to be one in a billion people in order to have a good and decent life. And I'm now looking more for those opportunities where I'm talented, I'm great, but like, in some ways, do you want to have to be talented and great every day in order to eat and to feed your family? And I would say that most people do not want to have to be amazing because we all, every day, all the time, because we have sick days. We all want to rest. We want to go on vacation, not just for a few days, but for a few months at a time. And so I think there's something to this element, all the things that we've learned and the sort of scars and the scabs that we've developed and lessons we've learned, and pairing that with things that are like foolproof.
Yeah. Well, that's kind of what I was going to allude to, is that if you're running the race and you got to a certain point where maybe you haven't gotten to exactly where you want to be, but you're running this race, I imagine if you stop and look back at the things that you've gained, you'll realize that you have enough to be successful. Like, and that's what kind of happened to me as we were talking, as I was trying to figure out what 2025 looked like for me. I was like, oh, I've done things that a lot of people haven't done. I have acquired a certain amount of skills that folks haven't acquired. And not only is it beneficial for me, but it's beneficial for everybody else if I stopped just looking inward and started looking outward. If I stopped just being like, what's the next big job I can get, versus how can I make sure everybody has these skills so we can all work? Like, that has multiple layers of benefits, and yeah. So I think you're absolutely right. Let's get to the future part of the podcast. Future is looking like the future. We don't know what's coming, but talk to me about some predictions. What is some predictions, crazy predictions you have about how creative culture, social impact, and these things are going to change or emerge in the next few years?
So I think a couple things, and this is, hot takes right off the top.
Yeah.
They're not good. They're cold takes. So don't hold me to these, brother. So I think one is I'm obsessed with the creative mashup. So I think going forward, 2025, I think collectives of creatives, like I don't know if being an influential person on your own is going to be enough in order to compete and sustain yourself. We're going to have to Voltron and partner with one another in order to win. So it's effectively like, how do we remake a studio? How do we compete against Amazon? And doing that on your own is challenging. Maybe nearly impossible. But if you start to stack the deck and add people who have different skill sets and partner with one another in the right ways, we got a shot. And so I think we're going to have to figure out ways to work better with one another in the ways that we've done it on set or in a company, in a startup, but like doing that, as you say, putting up shots. How do we do that faster, quicker with one another as a team? I think that is sort of one of my predictions related to creativity. And so that sort of translates to social impact, right? Like, I don't know having a celebrity say, vote for so-and-so is enough.
Clearly not.
Right? And so
Clearly not.
no. So I think it's got to be like, it's not just about the people who have millions of followers. Like, we got to think about who are the people who are on the ground, who are the people who have deep connections. A lot of those people are not resourced the way they need to be resourced. So how are we resourcing them? How are we making sure that they have what they need? So it's going to take a different type of collaboration and blueprint in order for us to move culture forward. What are the future of movies? Like, how are we leveraging? I mean, it's so many different things that are going to take different types of collaboration models that I'm excited and curious about.
I love that. Working for some of the richest people in the world, what are some of their secrets to building teams that we should all be looking at? What are they doing inside behind those closed doors when they're talking about building teams and collaborating that we should all be doing?
I'll tell you literally one thing.
Yeah.
I've worked for 3 billionaires, a few people who've, are somewhere in between 100 million and $1 billion. I think they're probably some of the fastest learners. And the way that they become, or I see them learn quickly, is that they are very quick to like invite so-and-so to dinner, to the meeting. And they ask an amazing question and they sit back and listen. They'll pressure test to be like, but what about that? What about that? So asking, again, great questions, but they're listening in ways that they're almost like seducing and squeezing insight out of the world's smartest people. And then they are leveraging that to like form their own opinions and come up with their own perspectives. And so that, to me, that is the one thing I saw working at Emerson, working at Chan Zuckerberg Initiative, working with others. These people learn fast, and they do it by asking really great questions to some of the world's leading minds. And they also read a ton of books. I mean, it's something I aspire to do more of, and they are constantly bringing in great information from amazing sources.
I love that. What's something everybody gets wrong when they're thinking about getting people or high wealth people, high net worth people to invest in smaller creative, smaller businesses? What are people getting wrong? Like, why are people missing out on funding?
I mean, I think, two things. One is, it's not about your idea. I mean, oftentimes it's like, do you know the right people? So do you have the right relationships? So I think that's like one. The other is the presentation of your idea matters. You go to sort of, in the presentation of your organization, your infrastructure matters. So you can know the right people, but then you can't write a cohesive theory of change around what you're building. And you can't put it into a memo. You don't know the 4-step, choreography of how do you present an idea and make it look professional. So those are sort of the two things that I see, is that sometimes people just don't know where do you go. It's like, oh, the Ford Foundation. Where do you go in the Ford Foundation to like get money? How do you get the right introductions? So that's like a hard piece of like infiltrating an ivory tower. It's just like, yeah, it's
So when they face that pressure test, they fail. Like, you might get in the door, but when they're going to start peppering you with some questions and looking over your stuff, that's not it.
Exactly.
I love that. And then, what's the future? Is the future VCs funding? Are people still looking to get funded in the same way? Or are people saying, is the way to go, hey, I'm going to start this business, I'm going to do it myself, I'm going to keep 100% of it or 80% of it? Is that the look?
Yeah, I think the answer is yes to all of it, right?
Yeah.
So it's just more of a proliferation of different types of funding models, everything from venture and the returns that are required for that, 100x, 1,000x, to bootstrapping, and then in between, community funded, nonprofit dollar, sponsorship. I mean, there are so many different types of revenue-based models for generating funding, loans, all these different things. I think we're entering into a period where you have to identify the right product for the right business at the right time. And so thankfully, it's not just about venture or just bootstrapping. There are a whole host of products in between their financial products that can be helpful for people. And it's really about identifying which one do you need and then where do you go to get it.
I love it. Thank you, man. I appreciate you for being here, brother. I think we dropped some knowledge on the people today.
I hope so. I mean, I think, if it's not information, hopefully it's inspiration. It's, to keep going. I think, your story, man, I'm inspired by you and your work. And so, this was an honor to share time and space with you and keep putting up shots. But, I feel like one thing we didn't talk about was like, how do you know when to stick with it? This feels like something to stick with. And so keep what you're doing, brother.
I love that. Thank you so much, man. Stay on for me. I want to chat with you a little bit after the stream. And thank you guys for listening to another episode of the Future Proof Podcast.